Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I am your host, Hannah Chapman, and I am here again for another Investment Friday with my Investment Friday co-host, who's here, Brad Haines, the Chief Investment Officer of Juncture Wealth Strategies. Brad, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. What's going on, man?
Not much. Just lots of stuff going on in the world and in the markets and in everybody's day-to-day lives as we are progressing through the season of spend. Right now, back to school's over. So what's next? Fall break. We've got Halloween coming up at the end of the month, then followed by, basically the last really tough month of work, which is November. Then we have Thanksgiving, and then followed up by the Christmas holidays. For those of us that have that are Jewish, so Rosh Hashanah is now, Yom Kippur was last week, so we'd like to recognize that and to have them celebrate as much as possible. So definitely the season to spend.
Yes, and today is Thursday, October 10th. It's 4 p.m. When we're recording this, to be released on Friday, October 11th. So that puts a timestamp on what the market's doing. We're also experiencing some crazy weather and happened for the last couple of weeks as well, right? We've had two very intense hurricanes come through Florida and elsewhere. Hurricane Helene last week that hit Florida hard, but hit western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee even harder as far as destruction goes. And then Hurricane Milton that just hit this week also really, really hit Tampa, Florida, surrounding area really hard. So what's interesting is the market. I don't think the market's really reacted much to those natural disasters yet. And, there's a lot more discussion on those fronts around, how is FEMA responding? What's the government response to that? Right? All in the lead up to the presidential election in November, which is a little less than a month away at this point. So we're not going to get into that part very much today. I just wanted to note that that's going on, and we'll see. Is that usually something that affects the markets when we have, natural disasters like that? When we've had bigger, Katrina or Harvey or some of the other highly destructive hurricanes that we've had.
Yeah, very much. Those are usually market moving events because it usually means that the property and casualty insurance companies and the reinsurance companies are going to be paying out billions of dollars in losses. Now, from what I understand, Helene caused a lot of damage in Western North Carolina. We all saw pictures of, certain cities or towns being underwater, basically. And the same happened just yesterday to parts of Florida, where you mentioned Tampa, Fort Myers, all of those areas got hit pretty hard. Now, what it sounds like is that they missed the worst case scenario, but still lots of people out of power, lots of people are sheltering in other places, and so hopefully the water recedes pretty quickly and they can restore power and light and all that to those residents.
So is that something that we would look to maybe over the next few weeks, months? How long is that effect usually out into the future?
Yeah, usually the negative impact of a big storm is pretty quick. It gets priced in pretty quickly. And you'll see that again from the insurance companies. You'll see that from oil companies, the price of oil going up, particularly depending on where it hits. If it's in the Gulf Coast and it hits more towards Texas, where we have a lot of refining capacity, that will change the price of oil and gasoline. But from Milton's standpoint, it not too much has changed, right? Oil's gone up a little bit, but that's more because of the Middle East crisis and not necessarily because of the hurricane. Now, what is interesting is in the short term, it's a negative impact. Over the mid and longer term, it's actually a positive impact on the economy, because what happens is it sets forth a massive amount of economic activity quickly in an area. So if you can just put yourself in the situation of a person who has a home in Tampa Bay that got flooded, well, you need to remediate all of the damage.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? Possible new floors, parts of new you have to the lower half of the walls. Yeah, new wiring in those areas, furniture, probably a new paint job. I mean, there's so much economic activity related to fixing those homes, and that takes a very long time. The most immediate impact is they want to get power back to most homes, and so people can return home from wherever they went to evacuate, and then they start the process of fixing everything, and that fixing process, that remediation process, takes a long time, but it really does pop up the economic growth in those areas.
So just to be so clear, right? This is not a net positive that we're talking about from people like losing their homes or going through this incredibly powerful storm and storms and more that are to come. But it is really interesting to think about it from the perspective, especially of like the contractors and the what am I trying, like the home services industries that really come in and do a lot of the work. Think about the linemen that come in from all over the country to help get power restored into communities. It really is interesting to see that the backside of that. Like there's a lot of work to be done, and people who are going to be doing that work. So while like my compassion and my compassionate heart goes out to all the people that have to deal with that and have to have their lives completely upended for who knows how long while things get back to normal. Yeah, it's so important for the people, the helpers, the people who are the builders, all of those individuals and companies that are there to help rebuild what's there. So you make a really fascinating point.
Yes. The human cost is very, very different. I mean, obviously, people have lost their lives, people have lost their homes and their belongings, and possibly, some other things that they really love. But solely from an economic perspective, it's usually has a long tail impact for good as people fix their homes.
And it's super interesting too, especially in the case of Florida, how insurance companies, this might be something that would be interesting to talk about in the future too, that insurance companies have been like actually like pulling out of Florida in different areas, and like not like we're not covering, hurricanes in different ways. And so like how the industry is shifting just overall because of these bigger storms, more, storms that are happening more often. Like, no, we don't want to pay to rebuild your house again 5 years later. Um, and that, which is really putting people and the real estate industry in a huge bind. Right. I've talked to real estate agents in Florida who have talked about like people can't sell their homes. Like their homes have been, if they're trying to leave Florida or sell their home in Florida, like no one wants to buy in certain areas, and it's very hard to move inventory because they can't, people can't move in and get insurance on their home. And then mortgage companies won't lend if people won't have insurance. So it's kind of a pickle.
Yeah, it is. And that is, that obviously it's gotten over the years as more insurance companies have pulled out of offering property and casualty insurance or home insurance in Florida. That becomes a more expensive and a more difficult prospect for, just homeowners. So it's, I mean, it's predictable. Every 10 to 15 years, you're going to have a pretty massive storm come up. And, the last one was Ian, now Milton. So, what's the next one? We don't know. And so, you know, fortunately, building standards have been have been improved in those areas to accommodate for these type of storms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, when we talk about that, we're talking about the older type homes that have been built for decades and they're not up to current code in terms of dealing with storm surge and the winds and all those things. I was talking to I was listening to a news report where they were interviewing a guy who is kind of one of the in charge of the utilities for Florida Power and Light, which is FPL. And he said the difficulty with these storms is the old style homes have their electricity up on poles between the houses. And he said the new type homes, they buried the electric lines, so it's not an issue from the wind. But the old style homes, which are getting to be fewer and fewer as they remediate over time and put the electricity in the ground, he said, but still you have pockets of people that are just going to miss out. It's going to take a while for them to get electricity because they may have 100 people, 100 homes, with this line out. Well, they've got to take care of all these millions first before they go to these little settlements or these little suburbs. So he said, we work as fast as we can to restore power, but it takes a while.
Well, it's super interesting when you talk about the hurricane hurricane proof like building codes. That reminded me of, the earthquake standards in California, or, the fire safety standards in Northern California, lots of parts of the West, right, where wildfires are a huge issue. Yeah, it's a question of like raising the building standards so that, there are homes now, there are types of homes that can completely withstand a wildfire, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's, if you live in a wildfire prone area, like it makes sense that we would want to encourage people to build safely for the area that they're in. So yeah, the hurricane windows, like all the ways that people can um, build safely for their area. I think that makes sense. And again, the insurance piece is super interesting to follow.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I
we'll talk
agree.
more about that. So a couple of the topics that I wanted to talk with you about, Brad. One is something that I've seen. So I'll admit I do enjoy TikTok. Love it. I not on there all the time, but I have a profile and I get interesting information and insights from TikTok that I don't necessarily see from other sources. I'm not talking about news necessarily, although there are some people literally live streaming from a hurricane in Tampa over the last couple of days, right? So that's like a pretty first person point of view news. But beyond that, there's something about having more of a pulse on different parts of um, not just the economy, but different groups of people that feels really important to me. It feels really important to me to understand, how people are experiencing our economy from different levels from, different areas of, okay, here's if you've got multiple millions of dollars, here's how you're experiencing things right now. If you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars, or if you've got, like a rising income, here's how you're experiencing the economy now. If you have, a stagnant income or you're having a hard time getting a job right now, here's how you're experiencing the economy. And I just, for me, that feels like important information for me to have and to consider. And one thing that I've been seeing a lot of lately is this idea that BlackRock and Vanguard own everything. That BlackRock as a company is somehow controlling all of the companies, all the corporations in the world, or like a huge majority of them. And there are different creators on different platforms that go around and tell you, okay, BlackRock owns all of these brands. If you go to the grocery store, they own all the brands on this shelf, all the brands on that shelf. BlackRock owns these, Vanguard owns these, so basically it's just the ruling elite class that owns everything. I also saw, a notation or commentary about Doug Emhoff, who is Kamala Harris's husband. When you are a public figure or married to a public figure, you have to give them all your financials and say, here's what I own. And someone came back and was like, his portfolio is in BlackRock. See, he's one of those ruling elites that owns BlackRock and owns, shares of SPY in his portfolio. And so as I'm thinking, like listening, watching, like we need to have more education. It's a lack of
Yes, we do.
education,
Yes, we do.
right? Around what that actually means. What does it mean when someone says BlackRock owns everything? And so I talked for a while, so I'm going to let you explain what that means.
Okay.
That BlackRock owns things.
Yeah, I'm not sure what generationally is happening other than our school systems have not taught people to think critically. I keep coming back to that the younger generation has a very difficult time thinking critically about different issues from different perspectives. I had an ethics professor in college tell me if you can't think of a really good argument for on one issue from three different perspectives, then you haven't thought about it, and
Mm.
you need to sit and think about it before you speak about it. But yeah, this younger generation that is very, very much into nefarious conspiracy theories really gloms on to these type of false narratives. Um, so BlackRock and Vanguard, and you mentioned the SPY, which is the Standard & Poor's Spider, which is a State Street ETF. Essentially, all they do is commingle money from individual investors and buy passive shares or passive positions in companies. So, for example, if you own the SPY, which owns 500 S&P 500 companies, and I give them $1,000, they're going to take that $1,000 and they're going to divvy it up across those 500 companies, and I own part of those companies via the SPY. Okay. So in reality, does State Street own those companies? Well, technically, yes, because then I own the fund, right? Because I
Right.
own part of the fund, right? I can vote for the fund. I have all equity interests. If they have management issues, we can get together as shareholders, and we can actually fire State Street as a manager and hire another manager for those assets. It never happens, but technically it can happen. So it's something that is very, very interesting that the younger generation doesn't realize that when they're contributing to their 401k or their retirement programs, when they're saving money and investing into these different mutual funds, they actually own the companies. I'll also go back to, would they be so upset if 10 years ago they went down the chip aisle and most of that aisle was owned by PepsiCo, right?
Mhm.
Nope, they wouldn't even have batted an eye. So now it's a finance company, so people get all bent out of shape because they can make it seem like a dangerous phenomenon, which it's not. It just isn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that conversation is changing a little bit now to where, um, there is a lot of side eye happening around, do we really want five companies owning the majority of all of our food production? And that is a different conversation than like BlackRock owns the world or Vanguard owns everything. Um, because there is, if PepsiCo or Nestle is another big one, controls our food supply, that's different, right? I think there's a there's a different conversation to be had in that arena. Whereas, if you, like you're saying, if you have a 401k, if you have an investment account where you buy mutual funds, um, if your grandparents started a 529 plan for you, or your parents started a 529 plan for you, and they invested it in any sort of mutual fund for the future, you likely own the companies, but you also likely have funds from BlackRock or Vanguard or Fidelity, right? These are some of the biggest players in the market. They buy, they create these bundles, they create mutual funds and ETFs that we then, as consumers, I'm putting myself in the consumer bucket here. Me as a consumer, I can go purchase that mutual fund. And then, like you said, now I have shares of all the companies that are inside that mutual fund basket. But my money, I've given my money. Let's say this is a BlackRock mutual fund. I gave my money to BlackRock. So that's why, BlackRock, maybe you can even look it up for me while we're talking. How much money does BlackRock have under management right now?
Oh,
And when you listen to this number, it's a lot. It's a lot of money. And we have to be really, like, again, the critical thinking hat needs to go on of, that's not just money that came out of thin air. This is money that investors have given from their paychecks, from their, whatever, the money that they own. They have put money into these mutual funds and ETFs and other products that BlackRock sells, and they can take it out whenever they want. So BlackRock is, like, the industry term is the custodian. They're holding that money. They don't own that money,
right.
right? So what's the number?
All right. What would you guess?
Oh my gosh, you're making me guess.
Come on, Hannah. You got it. You
Oh
got
geez.
this.
I am gonna say they have uh
Just do BlackRock. Just do
I'm
BlackRock.
gonna say $750 billion.
That's really, really not even close. So BlackRock has 10 trillion under management.
$10 trillion with a
So 10
T.
trillion. Okay. Vanguard has 7.2 trillion. Fidelity has 4.9 trillion. Now, bear in mind, I'm going to look this up because I don't want to give everybody I believe the US equity markets is only 41 trillion total.
So when we say
Oh, excuse
BlackRock
me.
has,
It's 55.2 trillion.
so 55.2 trillion is what is currently circulating through the US equity market stocks.
So between BlackRock, Vanguard, and Fidelity, and I'm going to throw Schwab in there as well. That's a good quarter. That's a good half, 50% of the whole marketplace. Now,
Wow.
so I'm going to step back and people go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Okay. Well, one, I'm going to ask, why is it terrible? Okay. The premise that people have with only having a few people, a few companies control a certain part or influence a certain part they always have a nefarious, like there could be a bad outcome for the consumer, right? So if there's down to, let's say, three, the top three, they could get together and they can say, hey, we're going to raise rates. We're going to raise our fees on these clients that we have. And because they're so large, they could probably do it. Okay. That is exactly opposite of what we've seen happen in this marketplace.
Right.
In fact, you've had Vanguard, BlackRock, Schwab, Fidelity all come out and they say, okay, for certain funds, we're going to have charge 1 basis point. We're going to charge 2 basis points, 7 basis points. Okay. And that's down from an average of 1%, 10 to 15 years ago. So it has collapsed by 90 some odd percent the fees. So as the lower fees have happened, more and more assets have flowed to those companies. And I would agree if we started to see market hamper, actions by these companies to hamper or to hinder market competitiveness, but it's been exactly opposite. These guys are cutthroat with each other, trying to lower the fees, trying to make better products, trying to make sure that they're doing everything they can to help the end user, the individual client, attain their financial goals. I mean, it's been exactly opposite. So yeah, they not control, they influence, or they are part of about half of the market, equity market. But it's because they've been the least expensive and they've done a good job helping clients out. So to me, that's not as a big a deal. Also, we have something else. Like I'm going to take Fidelity and Schwab, for example. Um, Fidelity and Schwab have a lot of individual investment managers that custody there, which Fidelity and Schwab have no control over. They have no idea what we're going to do. They don't have any say into what we buy or sell. And that's most of the money at Fidelity and Schwab.
Yeah.
Okay. These registered investment advisors are smaller groups of people. They're either financial advisors or like me, I'm an investment manager. So I discretionarily manage my clients' assets. So Schwab may be providing some research, but that's only one of my research outlets. I have a multiplicity of research opinions that I look through and that I then form my own opinion. So it's not like they actually can control. BlackRock owns a company called the iShares. iShares are a massive exchange traded fund platform, which a lot of RIAs like me use in our portfolios. Okay. So we use BlackRock. BlackRock has no influence on what we do because if they change that, like for example, if I'm going to use one of their funds, and if they for some reason in some way change the way they do things on that fund or on that ETF, I'm going to sell it and go to another one because I have a number of different. I have Fidelity, I have Vanguard, I have Schwab. I've got a whole lot of others that I can use, and so these are aggregate assets, but these aggregate assets are to a certain extent a little bit of double counting, and it includes people that have opinions other than what those custodial companies have.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it points even more directly to the fact that it's not it's not BlackRock or Vanguard as a company owning anything. They are holding funds for individual investors. And Schwab, as the example that you gave again, like Juncture Wealth Strategies, we custody a lot at Schwab. A lot of our client accounts are held at Schwab, and Schwab has no control, like you were saying, right? They don't get to tell us what we can or can't invest in. on behalf of our clients. And in the same way, the money that we have under management, and say, well, gosh, they control, hundreds of millions of dollars of assets. We manage those assets. We don't own them. That's not my money. The money that I manage for my clients is in no way, shape, or form my money. Right. And so that would be like saying the same way that people are talking about these bigger companies. BlackRock owns all of these shelves at the grocery store. It's like saying, Hannah, you own all of those millions of dollars that you manage. Like, but I sure as hell do not. Like, that is not how that works. That's exactly opposite of how that works.
Yeah.
You are being entrusted to create wealth, create a wealth engine for your clients. And that's exactly what's happening. So when you see, or if you hear of anyone talking in that way, or like making those kinds of comments, like, well, everything's just owned by XYZ company anyway, especially if they're talking about financial sector, like you can point them to this podcast. You can say, hey, you know what? Like that's not really how those companies work. It's not the same as, a company that is, Procter and Gamble or Johnson and Johnson or Kellogg or, General Dynamics. It's not a company like that where it's, they own the product and they're making money off the product. It's a different model that is actually centered around they do well if people allow them to manage their money. That's the only way that they make money. If people stop thinking they're doing a good job and they don't want their money to be managed by BlackRock anymore, you pull your money out and you go send it to Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab or whoever else. Right? It's the competition. This is what you were pointing to, Brad. Like the competition actually works in this sector, and it has worked in favor of the consumer, especially over the last. I mean, I've been in financial services specifically since about 2006, and like I know at least since then, like the quote unquote race to the bottom when it comes to fees has been a constant conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? Like the consumers are demanding lower fees, better service, better websites, better apps, like all of those things. And companies are really working hard to deliver on that.
Yeah, and they've done a great job. I mean, the fact that we could have a Robinhood meme stock frenzy in 2021, 2022 tells you how far the industry has come. Because when I got in the industry, you had to pay 1% to 2% commission on the way in and on the way out. So if you think about that, it went from a 2 to 4% cost to trade. Well,
just to trade, just to buy or sell a stock.
Just to buy or sell a stock, just to round trip that trade. So the fact that people can now trade for pennies on the dollar and trade 10-cent moves in these stocks or a dollar move is amazing. And it's I mean, I don't think it's a great thing, but I think the lower cost can be a really good thing for clients overall.
Yeah. So thank you for talking about that with me. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to, we have a little bit more time. I wanted to talk about one more thing today that follows on from that discussion that.
Hey, Hannah.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
You gotta go. Okay.
Yeah, I got an appointment that I gotta go to. So
well, then we will talk about this next time. We're going to talk about how money works in the economy, what it means when you have a lot of money, how we can actually do good with that, and what people actually do with their money that they don't necessarily tell you about. So we're going to talk about that next time. And Brad, thank you. Thank you for being here with me today. And as always, you know where to find us if you have questions. So appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
thank you.
Good. Thank you. Done recording.
sorry, I just know I've got a 3:00 appointment that I need to walk to. So
Oh, you
because my
literally.
car's in the shop, so I'm like, oh crap, I got to get going. So
Oh
I apologize for that.
no, that is okay. We will actually talk about it next time, though.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good walk. I hope it's not too hot out there.
No.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, @expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.